All right, welcome back. Yes, that is where we are starting off today. The energy transition plan, policy, program, we'll talk about that. So they'll shed as much light as possible. So we got a lady and two gentlemen joining us to shed light on the subject matter. Larry Shashere, SSA to the President on coordination and planning. Then Salisu Dairu is a director, National Council on Climate Change. He's here in Abuja Studios alongside Larry. And then we also have Professor Yemi Oke, who is of the Energy and Electricity Law Department, University of Lagos. He joins us virtually. Good morning, Prof. Thank you for joining us on the program. Well, Larry and Doctor, good morning as well to you both. So perhaps to start from Larry, just let's understand this concept first and foremost, energy transition, because, I mean, we know different scenarios and plans of what we're currently on at the moment. So if we could start from there, just letting us know the mindset, the concept of this energy transition in the first instance.
Well, the energy transition plan is a tool that we have developed. It's a data-driven tool and plan that helps us chart our pathway to achieving net zero emissions by 2060. Globally, the commitment is for countries, a number of countries have committed to achieving net zero by 2050. But because we took a data-driven approach, we found that it was realistic for Nigeria to achieve net zero by 2060. I think some other countries have even committed to it as far away as 2070. And really the objectives of defining this pathway for ourselves is to ensure that we balance our two objectives of ensuring that our people have energy access as well as achieving the milestones and the global commitment to achieving net zero as well. As we know, climate change has a significant impact on countries like ours in terms of agriculture and similar. So that's really what the plan is. And it covers a few sectors, and it defines this pathway across a few sectors. So there's the oil, power, gas, transport, the building sector as well. And if you look at the plan, there's a website that provides more information, energytransition.gov.ng. If you look through the plan, you'll see specific pathways that plot the route from now till 2060 and how we will ramp up energy access and then also achieve net zero by 2060.
So, okay, go on.
I was just going to ask, transiting from what to what precisely? Because for a lot of Nigerians, when it comes to energy, the first thing that comes to your mind is electricity at the minimum. And we know that a lot of our electricity comes from renewable sources. I mean, the one that government provides, water, the hydro dams, and also gas, which is supposed to be cleaner than any other source. But because of the inefficiencies in this sector, we are now forced to use other, fuels, petrol and diesel, which are not very efficient and which also pollute our environment. So what precisely is government hoping to transit from?
That's exactly right. We do depend a lot on petrol and diesel generators at the moment. So we need to move from that to gas. And that's the premise. That's the premise of the Nigerian position on a just energy transition. We are prioritizing gas in our transition. We want to increase our baseload. We want to increase the use of gas, which is cleaner than using petrol and diesel in our energy transition. If we ramp up the use of gas, fossil fuels, to some people, if we ramp up the use of gas by 2030, 2035, we create a stable baseload, and then we can start to increase substantially the renewable feedstock into our power profile or our energy profile, if you like.
Yes, I was just about to come to him because I could see that he wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, you see, the idea is from where we are at the moment, the gas and the diesel are very, very heavy polluters. And the transition is to a cleaner energy. And in addition to what Larry has just told us, we are also working within the context of this plan to solarize the energy system to a very large extent, of which, we have this combined benefit of having a cleaner energy and then also fulfilling all the obligations that the president has made with respect to Nigeria's nationally determined contributions towards the global, management of climate change, to leave or to keep, the temperatures, below 2%, 2 degrees centigrade, prior to the industrial period. So we have quite a number of trajectories, that are based on this. And as Lanre rightly pointed out, this is a plan that has gone through very intensive studies and backed by a lot of data and information. So that helps to.
If I could jump in,
yeah.
Help us reconcile that with what the minister said, Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, that we're not going to ditch our energy resources to please those who want us to transit, probably Western countries.
Yeah, but if you look at the trajectory, we're in 2022, and this target is towards 2060. So the transition, ditching means at this particular moment, we are going to abandon the existing energy base for the country. But this plan is to see how we can transit over this period, such that the country not only takes advantage of the innovations and the value chain, additions that are going to be generated at various stages of this plan for economic purposes, but also to bring, development across the various sectors of the economy, and then also creating jobs in the process of these changes in technology. And within this plan also, there are specific targets to absorb even some of the risks or losses that we expect to accompany. So
we'll talk about that
mitigations
as we progress. Don't worry, no, just a minute. We've got Professor Oke also waiting in the wings to weigh in on the matter. Prof, go ahead, please. How does this come across to you?
Thank you very much, Chamberlain. It doesn't come to me across as anything new. That is it something that is impressive. Honestly, to be honest with you and Nigerians, it's just a question of motion without movement, really. It's what I call terminological deployment. You're just deploying terminologies, nothing new is done or said. Frankly speaking, there's nothing new in the solarization plan, meaning that we should not place a lot of emphasis on using solar as a form of renewable energy. But the question is, Marco rightly asked the question, is it available? Is it sustainable? Is it affordable to Nigerians? Most of these policies are just cosmetic policies that wouldn't really percolate down to the Nigerian masses. Now the lecturers are not being paid. Speaking from our own constituency, can I afford solar? I mean, Chamberlain and Marco, if you have solar panels in your homes, even inverters, I'm sure you know that will cost a few millions. It's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's not even affordable to Nigeria. So when we're talking of bringing about alternatives, that makes sense to me. If you're having alternatives, what are you substituting for? Are you moving from frying pan to fire? Nigerians, even when power sector is privatized, because that's the main thing, we thought it's going to be a kind of an El Dorado, like Nigerians will have easy access to power, affordable, sustainable, and reliable. But our hearts are broken.
All right, let's
nothing new.
Let's see if we can get some clarity from here, if you say there's nothing new about it. So, Larry, you want to respond to that?
Yes, thanks so much. I'm not sure what Professor Oke was referring to. I hear him say a solarization plan. This is the energy transition plan. And just to be clear, and it goes back to your question earlier, what are we transiting from? To be clear, it sounds as though it's just another renewable energy off-grid plan. That's not what it is. It acknowledges, for sure, that there are challenges, there are energy deficits in our country. Unfortunately, I regret to report that over 90 million people in our country don't have access to energy. And that's exactly what this plan does. It seeks to ensure that we achieve energy access while achieving net zero at the same time. So again, if you look at the plan, the idea is to prioritize gas because gas is the fastest way, is the easiest way, and frankly, it's the cleanest way for us in this country with such huge, significant deposits of gas to achieve energy access in a short space of time. So the idea is to ramp up the use of gas by 2030, 2035, when we have a strong baseload, a strong grid that will drive economic development, that will drive industry. We then start to introduce renewables so that we increase the significant we increase the portion of renewables in our energy profile. This plan, I mean, I think he was talking about a lot of motion with no action. I'm not quite sure what that was. But so the plan, just in terms of cost, the plan will cost about $410 billion above current spending levels. This translates to about $10 billion a year. And that's what the Energy Transition Working Group that His Excellency the Vice President chairs has set as an objective for itself to raise awareness and funding for the plan that has specific projects that are now scoped, projects that will immediately help us increase energy capacity and also that will not add to emissions. Now, and it's not just power, it's also clean cooking as well. We also have about 175 million people in this country who don't have access to clean cooking. Using gas is important. At the moment, we need to transit. You asked the question, what are we transiting from? We need to transit from using wood fuel to cook to using gas.
So I know that they have been, this is not the first time. I mean, I know that what is happening now is a little different in the sense that the vice president is the one who's chairing this and also trying to make sure that different government ministries are coming together to synergize. But before now, we had a plan by the Ministry of Environment to ensure that there was clean cooking fuel. I think there was a time when these clean cook stoves were launched, and there was an effort to get it to rural communities. There was a time that we're trying to bring down the price of cooking gas and ensure that rural women also had access to it. We've also seen a time when a national gas plan was launched. All of this was in a bid to ramp up electricity generation. That hasn't quite panned out. So the question is, what are we doing differently this time? Because for a number of people, they believe that if we can just get our electricity sector right, maybe this plan can even be accelerated by, I don't know how many years. But the problem they see is the fact that our current electricity generation, transmission, and distribution isn't quite efficient. And maybe that's why we're left to even be talking about fossil fuels in people's homes. So what is different? What precisely are we doing differently? And why so late in this administration? Because only so much can be achieved before now and the leaving of this particular administration.
I think to a large extent, if you look at this plan, it's actually to address most of the challenges that you just highlighted. And doing it differently rests on the fact that this plan is supposed to be driven by a lot of private sector involvement at various stages of its implementation. And in the past, yes, we've had, this disjointed planning and kind of different sectors working in silos and not having, the ability to, because the issue of this energy now, seems to transit, or rather involves more than just one sector. For instance, you also have the oil and gas, you have the electricity sector, you also have the forestry and forestry-related matters, particularly with issues of charcoal. So this plan is addressing, the challenges associated with the failures of majority of the activities that have been put in place earlier to really address
Professor
the issue of energy.
Are you suggesting, is your point such that our challenges notwithstanding, we shouldn't consider this plan, which they say will get us to a better place?
Chamberlain, uh, what I do is to say it the way it is. The energy transition plan is not saying anything new. Let me give you instances. It's all about keying into the COP outcome. That is Conference of Parties to the Climate Change. And each time they meet, they try to incentivize compliance. And that is why some $10 billion is available. And Nigeria is in a hurry to roll out plans and to roll out schemes, to roll out targets, to roll out unrealistic structures. There's nothing new, really. Okay, let me take you back. The one that made a lot of sense to me was the Bhutanization policy of 1986 of the military era. What was Bhutanization policy? Bhutanization policy was a policy to bring about intensive usage of cooking gas, liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, and they set up LPG depots in about 19 cities, Ilorin, everywhere. Thereafter, they stepped it forward to cylindrization policy, meaning now that we are producing cooking gas, we should now package cylinders from home because we are importing cylinders, and we had continued as a nation. Years back, now we're still talking of domestic cooking gas as an alternative to fossil fuel, greener, cleaner energy. That's nothing new. We've had those fine policies that were abandoned, that were never properly implemented several decades ago. Now, we met at the Conference of Parties to Climate Change. Our monies are dangled at Nigerians, and now we're all about now the bureaucracy start to roll out plans. It's all about domestic gas utilization, reducing levels of emission, and the incentives that go with it. As part of incentive, you have to scale up your pathways to sustainable energies, which talks about renewables, gas, but still, those solar too, several options. The point is it readily available? Is it sustainable? Is it affordable to Nigerians? Affordability, sustainability, those are key issues to be asking.
All right.
Now we're planning, we are visioning kind of for the next political dispensation. Would that be reasonable? Would that be acceptable? Is that the path they want to do when they come on board? Because they've adopted a number of policies that hasn't worked. I'm sure they want to take a departure from the outgoing government. So it's all about the policy of the Conference of Party to Climate Change.
All right, Prof.
Rolling out plans,
okay.
Putting incentives. And Nigeria needs to do a few things to be able to attract the funding package. That's what brought about all these nomenclature changes. Nothing new, really.
All right.
From my own side.
Just hold your thoughts. He's raising questions as to availability, sustainability, and is it going to be acceptable to those who you want to transition in the first instance? But just hang on, because we'll have colleagues in Lagos who equally have got questions for all of you. Go ahead, guys.
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. I think it's actually a valid place to begin with, Mr. Shore, because I mean, I just did a simple search of energy in Nigeria, something like that, and I have quite a number of agencies of governments: Energy Commission of Nigeria, Nigeria Atomic Energy Commission, Center for Energy Development, Electricity Regulatory Commission, Electricity Management, Electricity Liability Management Company, and the list goes on and on. How does this plan, I mean, if anything, if what Professor Oke said is anything to go by, how do all these agencies of government work together or differ from this plan in order for it to achieve its desired goal?
Thanks so much for that question. You're absolutely right. We've got all of these agencies, and that's exactly why we've got an energy transition working group that's chaired by the Vice President and is populated with line ministries and ministers that cover all the agencies that you mentioned. So the Energy Transition Working Group comprises Ministry of State Petroleum, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Power, NNPC, the Rural Electrification Agency, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Works, and Housing. So basically the idea, and I think Makwe spoke to this earlier, what's different? We've had all these different various other policies, clean cook stoves, all kinds of other things. The whole point of the working group and the energy transition plan is to draw together various existing initiatives, excuse me, various existing initiatives, draw them together and see how everything works. In terms of why this is happening at this time, how will the next government take it up? Well, the president committed to achieving net zero by 2060 at an international conference of parties last year. So Nigeria is bound by that. This is a plan that really addresses private sector projects. That's the other issue to be raised as well. I think reference was made to previous programs that were intended to be implemented by government.
Well, yeah.
What the Energy Transition Plan does is it brings in private sector financing to support private sector projects that will help us achieve
Madam,
this.
you know,
what the plan has done
going again, just 1 second, if you don't mind adding to that, going again to what Professor Oke said the other time, one is wondering what is new really, because, and why now, again, you know, aping on Malquest's question, because there's a document on the internet, Nigeria Energy Master Plan, dates back 2014. Most certainly that work didn't begin in 2014, must have begun much earlier than that. So is it that the government neglected that one or abandoned it altogether to pick up on its own project and then, you know, come up with this plan in the twilight of its days? Because there's those who would also allude that that plan, Energy Master Plan of Nigeria, coming up in 2014, was in the twilight of the previous government.
Well, I mean, in terms of timing, I mean, this was passed by the Federal Executive Council earlier this year, February 2022. Work has been going on it for certainly well over a year, perhaps 2 years. So in terms of timing, it's really just when it was completed. Again, these documents will be institutionalized. If there is another government in the transition, this will be handed over to them. A lot of work has been done in there already, and that's why we have a civil service to carry on the work. So in terms of the timing, I mean, I really don't know what to tell you. I don't know that it was a deliberate plan to release it so late in this administration.
Does that mean that
in terms of whether it builds on other things, as I said earlier, it does draw together existing work that is being done. It works. We've got apart from all the things you've mentioned, we've got the Solar Niger project. It takes that into consideration. So what it does is it takes all the work that we are doing at the moment. We've done so much work in REA with NNPC as well on the decade of gas, on the solar power Niger program that was in the economic sustainability plan that was passed in 2020. It brings together all of this and tries to cost it. It's really just trying to focus on what is the data saying? How are we going to increase energy access and at the same time ensure that we don't increase our emissions beyond the global commitments that we have made? But acknowledging that energy access is our priority because economic development is our priority, because jobs for our people is priority, because clean cooking for our people is priority.
Well, I wonder, well, if in line with Ayo's question, it is the same document, or is it incorporating the same goals and objectives of the document from 2014? But so that we don't manage our time, I'd like to come to you, Mr. Dahiru. Really, I want us to talk about the deadline to achieving energy access, which is Sustainable Development Goal 7. We have just about 8 years to that. And with 2060, fast approaching. It may seem far, but it's upon us already. And consider, if you tie that to the amount that the Vice President announced as the projected cost to achieving energy by 2060. Is Nigeria not only playing catch-up and far behind in achieving that target?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. In actual fact, I think Nigeria is not far behind because there are a number of specific, giant strides that our government has done. But before responding to this, I just want to touch on some of the issues raised, particularly by Prof. and the last but one speaker from the Lagos end. That, I mean, there's nothing new. Yes, it's true. There's nothing new. But what this plan did was take into consideration all the previous, plans and projects that have been done, reviewed them, and then extracted, identified some of the issues or challenges that prevented them from working, and then incorporated them into this particular plan. Secondly, this is a plan that I think is also slightly different from what we had in the past. You reeled out, for instance, within the energy sector alone, the number of entities that are involved. And for this, the federal government, if you do recall, has done what is termed as probably the first time that a country in Africa has done, which is to put in place the National Climate Change Act, which now gives the two major factors that affected the project implementation in the past. One, the legal backing and the actual structure for implementing these activities, and two, providing a second, an alternative or a complementary funding mechanism that will help to ensure that these projects that are really central to Nigeria's economy are put by identifying the need to have a climate change fund to be established specifically for addressing and implementing these projects, and also to have an opportunity to establish the framework for a carbon market. Now, this particular energy transition plan is going to bring about massive reductions in emissions. And the choice of the energy sector to provide these emission reductions is because if you look at the profile, because this study also took a profile of the emissions, coming from the different sectors in the country, about 65% of it comes from the energy sector. So it provides
Dahiru,
the right.
If I may come in there, Mr. Dahiru, if I may come in there, pardon me if I may come in there, it's a good thing you talk about funding, which is what we're going to head to. That'll be after we return from this break. And also you talked about, carbon emissions reduction. I think it's more important for Nigerians to have access to the energy in the first place before we get to carbon emission reduction. But we'll explore all of that aspect of the conversation. That will be after this break. We must take some messages now. Stay with Sunrise Daily. Welcome back. It's still Sunrise Daily on Channels Television, and we're looking at the energy transition plan as announced by the Vice President yesterday, for which he says Nigeria requires $410 billion to transit. And we still have with us Mr. Salisu Dahiru, Director General, National Council on Climate Change. We have Professor Yemioke of the Energy Electricity Law, University of Lagos, and we also have Ms. Lanre Shashore, the SSA to the President on Energy. Mr. Dahiru, just before the break, you were talking about the framework that would make that makes this energy transition plan different from other plans. of the past. And you talked about funding, the provision of a funding mechanism, which is why I now want to refer to the Vice President's statement yesterday that Nigeria requires $410 billion. And he in fact said that an initial $10 billion for which to kick off the plan is in the works with Nigeria's partners. And I also recall that the country director for the World Bank is also making a commitment of $1.15 billion to kick off this plan. Please clarify that these commitments are in the form of loans. And if indeed they are, how advisable is it, because Nigeria is in dire straits economically at this time in terms of revenue. And also, no one is going to give the country these amounts without any, other requirements.
Okay, Larry will also comment on this. First and foremost, you see, at the beginning of this program, Larry and myself did highlight the fact that the energy transition plan is an aspect of our commitment under the NDCs and also our commitment to achieve a net zero emissions by 2060, not energy efficiency by 2060. So let's make that distinction. And for the fact that in doing this, we are looking at not just one target or one benefit. This is a beneficial, an activity or a project or a program that has multiple benefits running from revenues to development to value chains to job creation, and also climate proofing our economy as a whole. So, because it is discussed as an aspect of climate change, the support or the funding contributions or support that we are getting from these global partners for climate change activities in developing countries is never done by a loan. You cannot support Annex 1 countries, that is developed countries, supporting or involving themselves in activities to help reduce emissions in non-Annex 1 countries or developing countries like Nigeria. Never do you take a loan to do it. So these are subsidies as well as actual, in some activities, in-kind contributions by way of transfer of technologies, innovations, as well as also embarking on projects that are going to be of mutual benefit to these countries. Yes, there's a give and take for developing countries to really provide this kind of support. There's also some takeaway for them because they're also offsetting the emissions associated with their own economy. So this is a big gamut of things happening. But in the long run, I believe the key question we should be asking ourselves is, what will be the scenario or what will be the situation in a do-nothing scenario? Where we are at the moment, should we remain where we are?
Hold on, Mr. Dahiru.
Continue to pollute?
Mr. Dahiru, you just acknowledged that there's a give and take in the funding commitment. What's the take if we give?
The take is, this is similar to an offset project or program or arrangement, whereby the support that is coming is also to offset the carbon emissions associated with the economies of these Annex 1 countries that are providing the support under the UNFCCC.
No, I haven't got a great deal to add. Just to be clear that a lot of the projects in the energy transition plan are private sector projects. The objective is to raise private sector financing for these projects, so projects that already exist. So really the goal is to support actors who are working in the various sectors, in oil, in gas, in power, in renewables, to really just do more. So for example, companies like solar, those who are solar power developers and similar. So it's really a private sector focused plan as well.
Professor, okay, what would you recommend as we begin winding down now?
It's not very clear there, but I guess you guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
My views is a question of not getting our national priorities right. And I'm sorry to say this. Nigeria is not even ranked when it comes to carbon emission. The West is heavy emitters of carbon, and they agree the climate change. And from time to time, they try to cut developing countries to slow down their own development so that the world is not dangerously polluted. Nigeria hasn't really emitted. So, I mean, we've done several papers on that, that's on the side of the academics, because really, we haven't really developed to that level of starting to cut down growth. But the developed country will quickly dangle some dollars at us so that we can comply with those things from COP meetings and the rest. My position is this. When we talk of gas utilization, we can't meet our domestic gas demand, even when domestic gas obligations is written into the Petroleum Industry Act. Developed countries are talking of really incentivizing compliance at the level of electric cars, charging point, and what have you. But let's face our whole challenge as a nation, which is essentially power. Most power is generated from gas. Gas is an international commodity. The Gencos are not having enough gas for electricity generation, not to talk of transmission. Nigerians are not having enough electricity. What have we done as a nation to scale up our gas production? If that is what we are saying, it will make better sense to me. But now talking of certain climate change accord that Nigeria is now struggling to comply with, even when a country like US that is really developed is not interested in cutting down its emission. As to say in the academics, environmental sustainability might not be a luxury good for developed countries who haven't developed to start to slow themselves down. Or even some will argue that developing countries may develop in ways that may not be environmentally sustainable, provided they can repair the environment later after they might have attained certain level of growth and development. We haven't developed, we are now being told to slow down. Those who developed and polluted the world, they are now even not interested in slowing down, but we rather aggregate some funds, throw it at us to start to roll out policies and plans to slow down our own development and growth. That's the misplacement of national priorities. Gas demand is huge. You are telling gas producers to sell to domestic companies and for homes and industries in Nigeria, and it costs an average of X amount to export it as an international commodity, and you're asking them to sell to domestic use at a loss. They're not going to answer that. So that's the challenge, because most of the gas that's generated they're sold at international markets at prevailing international prices. We can't definitely have enough gas for our use at home. And those are the challenges. David Mokwe mentioned it. We should focus on our own national priorities. I understand the way they want to go about the plan, but then I can't really see the actual need of Nigerians being met the way they're going about it, because we've had challenges even meeting our domestic gas demand.
Okay, Prof.
Even when domestic gas obligations is
they hear you, and so they'll just like to briefly respond before we wrap up. In addition to a part of the last bit of what he said is, what does this actually mean for the man out there who is going to be used to his diesel, trying to provide power for himself? So go ahead, as brief as you can, please.
Yeah, I mean, you popped the right question because of what Prof has been saying, which is what are his recommendations, and probably I didn't get him right, but I couldn't pick, what options that he's giving us. And I did ask the question that what will be our situation as a country in a do-nothing scenario, based on all the challenges that we highlighted here. And like we keep, repeating about this plan. The idea is to have a deviation from what our attitudes have been with disjointed development. So we see within this plan an opportunity to right a lot of the wrongs associated with previous program implementations, and we intend to do that. And the key issue, the key objective is access to energy.
All right.
So
okay.
I don't know what else.
Briefly, Larry, go ahead.
Are we being asked to slow down first and foremost? Does this plan also involve a slowing down?
No.
Exactly. That's
Not
just
at
it.
all.
It does not. And he talks about putting Nigeria's priorities in front. That's exactly what it tries to do. It says that gas is important to us in this country, not only because it is our livelihood, but because it is the fastest way we can reach energy access for all of our people who don't have power. So that's the very first thing. It prioritizes gas. It says to the world that in our transition, we will prioritize gas usage. So
and a lot less on what? On diesel?
And a lot less on diesel and petrol. Because we can power more. We can do more with gas. We can have a stable source of base power. We can have a stable base load if we ramp up gas. So that's just it. We're trying to crowd in investment for that, to ramp up energy usage so that by 2035 or thereabouts, we will start to introduce renewables. I agree, we are not a huge emitter of gas, but guess what? We are part of a community of countries. We have our own obligations, A. B, we are also one of the people who experience the harshest impact.
All right.
So we do have a responsibility in that regard.
We have to anchor at those points, even though, there are several other challenges, even with the diesel and fuel that was supposed to lay a lot less emphasis on and focus on gas, wondering what that will ultimately mean to the average person out there by 2060, which is when this target also anchors. Well, we have to thank you all. Larry Shashore is the SSA to the President on Coordination and Planning, Salisu Dahiru, Director, National Council on Climate Change, as well as Professor Yemi Oke of Energy and Electricity Law Department, University of Lagos. Thank you all for your time here today. Give us a moment, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Right, we will be back.